Before I made a list of overrated UFC fighters, and now I'm going to be talking about underrated UFC fighters who I quite frankly feel deserve more glazers that they just don't have right now. The reason why I have Pantoja right there is because there was a time where we got so unexcited to watch Pantoja defend his belt. And I'm saying we because it might not have been specifically a you thing, but there was a lot of people who thought that this was the most boring and god-awful champion, especially coming off of the heels of a fighter like Davison Figueiredo holding the strap at 125, who was just straight up eating people before Brandon Moreno, of course. To see these methodical grappling decisions where, Pantoja would win them, but they would usually go the full distance, and they would be co-mained before really big events that we wanted to see, and it would kind of be like cutting the edge off of the anticipation for the main event. People were wanting to see him lose and drop this belt. But over the course of the years, Pantoja has become one of the most respected flyweight champions, and champions in general, in the entire UFC. And deservedly so, because the guy is so good. And with the level of skill that he possesses, there's a good chance that he never drops the belt. At least until he gets old and falls off. A prime Pantoja, there's a good shot that he just stays champion. So yeah, let's get right into the list. We're going to be talking about fighters who deserve more glazers that I feel are criminally underrated. One of the most standout picks that I have off the top of my head that I can immediately call to is going to be Charles Johnson at flyweight. This guy has a lit haircut. People call him a vet, and he's only 34 years old. And 34, it's kind of old to be considered a prospect. But Lerone Murphy is pulling it off. Lerone Murphy is a 34-year-old prospect, and we make jokes about it, but we still honor it. With Charles Johnson, it's like, whatever, Unc, put the fries in the bag. And all he's doing is knocking out prospects on prospects on prospects, dude. Thanks to him, the only undefeated prospect that we have in the flyweight division is Andre Lima. And I already said that I thought that this would be a good fight. This guy flatline KO'd Lonnie Kavanaugh and Joshua Van, and he's really earned the title of prospect killer. It's not even like prospects die and they're no longer prospects after they beat Charles Johnson. I've said this before. It's like a rite of passage. You need to lose to Charles Johnson before you can be acknowledged as a true prospect in the flyweight division. It's like that's part of like your coming of age story is you get brutally flatlined by Charles Johnson, but then what do you do next? He is like the hurdle for you to overcome. He only fights undefeated fighters. The only guy who's undefeated that he didn't give an L to is Ramazan Timurov, who was confirmed to be a cheater in their fight. He was removed from the rankings whenever he got banned. Charles Johnson was given back his number 15 spot and given another undefeated fighter in Lonnie Kavanaugh to fight with in China, which is like his home court because he's half British and half Chinese. Chins him in front of his boys. No problem. Literally light work, no reaction. Charles Johnson gets that done. People treat him like he's over 40 years old, calling him Unc and stuff. He's not really doing himself any favors because his whole thing is like MF Doom is his bit, and that's kind of like some old head stuff to be into, but different strokes for different folks, He's really a prospect himself, and people want to discredit that, but calling a spade, he's beaten so many prospects that he has to be a prospect just by association at this point, for the fact that he's snuffing out these young guys so easily. This is some of the best boxing at flyweight, hands down. This is the closest thing that we have to touch of death power at 125 pounds as well. I said before that considering Kai Asakura, there's no way to have Ngannou-esque power at flyweight. This guy somehow manages to have that one-shot capability to be able to change fights and put people's lights out with one well-placed punch. As we saw in the Lonnie Kavanaugh fight, he was getting dominated the entire time in that fight. He was landing as he was wrestling and then creating the openings to get his boxing going, but it really was down to him landing one lunging hook that completely flatlined Kavanaugh and won him the fight. So, Charles Johnson, I will always sing his praises. He deserves more fans for certain. Derrick Lewis is another fighter who I think is underrated. Maybe not by others, but by me, surely. I thought that, dude, he's 40 years old, And I thought that they were sending the cleanup crew to get him up out of there whenever they had him fight with Taliesin Teixeira in Nashville. But Derrick Lewis is and always will be an inevitability. You win 2 fights against blobs, and then you get knocked out stiff by Derrick Lewis in some random city's fight night. And that's just the way that it goes. The prophecy will always be fulfilled in this order. You get to the UFC, You debut, you win against a fat guy. You beat another fat guy. And then they give you the jump up in competition that is Derrick Lewis, and you do not pass that test. You get knocked out. And I thought it would be this way whenever he fought fighters like Tuivasa. I think that Pavlovich even got him too, which, I mean, unfortunate, but I mean, it happens. That was back whenever there were prospects at heavyweight. Now in 2025, there's no such thing as a prospect at heavyweight. You're just a guy who survives in the division long enough to fight Derrick Lewis, where you're inevitably going to get brutally folded by him. I said he was 40 before. I'd say he has a maximum of like 4 more years of being able to put up these types of performances against people, just chinning them brutally, before it's like completely over for him. I thought it would have been this year where the downfall started. I thought it had already been in full motion based off of him losing to like Tuivasa and stuff, but no, man, no. He'll still be around for a minute, Derrick Lewis, is what I'm trying to say. And he definitely deserves all the fans that he still is able to maintain from the Octagon interviews and the performances themselves, because I think that he's still going to continue to notch these types of knockouts, and he'll hold the record for the most UFC knockouts for a while. And he'll only keep adding to this record as well. Beneil Dariush is another fighter who I think is criminally underrated. I underrate him time after time again in fights against like Gamrot, you know. Sure, he fights fighters like Charles Oliveira and he gets wet up by Charles Oliveira, right? Or against Arman Sarukian. But I mean, these are one-offs, right? These are elite fighters in the division. And Beneil Dariush fits somewhere in the middle of elite fighters at the top of the division. He has attributes that do rival the elites, right? His grappling is top of the line. But his strike defense is where he kind of falls in the BSD, Renato Moicano ranges sometimes. But overall, he's a really solid grappling specialist for this weight class. Lightweight is a division where historically you've always just had to be good at something. And the best fighters are the people who can merge high-level skills in multiple different aspects. The champion who just vacated the belt is a really good grappler and striker. The same thing can be said about Ilia Topuria. Beneil Dariush, he doesn't have notable durability, but it's good enough to survive early onslaughts from fighters without devastating power. And his striking offensively is just good enough to be able to last it at the top of this division as well. The people who he was defeated by, Charles and Arman, they're perfect counters to his style of fighting, this grappling heavy pressure. Each of them are also pressure fighters, and they're more damaging with their striking offense than Beneil Dariush is. But for guys like Renato Moicano or like Gamrot, like I had mentioned before, if you only possess solid grappling that like rivals his but isn't pronouncedly better than Beneil Dariush's as your primary asset as a fighter, you will not beat Beneil Dariush. This guy's kind of old as well, but his chin seems to be rejuvenated. He got dropped by Renato Moicano, and I was smirking, like, real smug-like, thinking that this was going to be a wash after he had gotten dropped, but he was able to pull himself up by the bootstraps and get back into this fight and win a decision over Renato Moicano. And he proved himself to be the most reliable gatekeeper that the 155 division has to offer. So, I mean, moving forward, until something changes, that's kind of what we got. It's Beneil Dariush, and I mean, he's going to be the dude who prevents guys from getting into the top 10 of the lightweight division, because he's just better than most of the people who are ranked below him at the current moment right now. Steve Garcia is going to be the next fight that we're going to talk about. He's criminally underrated in my opinion. Not enough people talk about what he's going to do next or plans that they would have for him. Whenever we're matchmaking the featherweight division, I don't think there's enough people who are excited to watch Steve Garcia's next fight. This guy's a 6-foot featherweight. He weaponizes his range. He is a finisher as well. He got KO'd stiff by Mahashate in 2022, but I mean, this just doesn't count. I don't know why it doesn't count, but he's been on a wicked finishing streak after this, so I mean, it's at least been erased from my memory. I have to go back and rewatch the clip in order for it to like actually resonate for the fact that it did take place, because the current Steve Garcia and the current Mahashate, granted Mahashate is a lightweight, it doesn't even make sense how this happened. But I mean, yeah, Steve Garcia got knocked out cold in that fight. But I mean, Steve Garcia, he boasts wins over Melquizael Costa, Calvin Kattar most recently, Chase Hooper before. Melky and Chase Hooper both got finished via knockout, and also Shep Mariscal as well. He fought him in LFA and he beat him up there. Garcia is an unprecedentedly violent fighter. He has a path to victory against any active featherweight in my opinion, and I think that he deserves more praise for the performances that he does put on. Michael Morales is going to be our next entry. It feels like nobody's anticipating his return. In such a stacked division like welterweight is, there isn't enough hype to go around. We've kind of consolidated all of the hype around Carlos Prates, around all of the old guard of the Usman era that's still around, like Bilal and like Leon and like Kamaru. I think that Colby Covington has more speculation around his next fight than Michael Morales. And that might actually be what's next for Morales, Colby Covington. But, I mean, dude, I feel like Michael Morales has gotten snubbed so bad in the matchmaking that they chose to go with in Prates versus Leon Edwards, because Morales has been calling out Edwards for months prior to Carlos Prates just getting the fight because he asked for it. And I don't think that that's fair. Another thing that I don't think is fair is how this guy is able to fight at 170. He is a massive weight bully. I don't know how much longer he can even make this division. I could totally see this being like a Jailton Almeida case where he starts missing weight and then they're like, okay, buddy, you got to go up to 185. And so he just goes up to 185 and he's perfectly fine to be there. This guy's number 7 in the division, and by and large, it feels like people are caring more about what's next for Buckley or what's next for Ian Gary versus what he's got going on. And it might be because he'd be cross-dressing back in Ecuador. I'm not sure what that's about. Why is this man on the side of the road in a romper, dude, wearing hoop earrings, man? I didn't even know how to feel about that when I saw it. But I mean, he's got it. Like, bro, he got it for real. Like, if you saw the fight with Burns, you know he got it for real. This guy is different. The next fighter is going to be my boy Chris Duncan. He's basically in the same spot as Nazim Sadikov, who's confirmed to have a top 15 fight. Already scheduled for November. We just don't know the opponent yet, but that's where a lot of different fighters are right now. They're leaking that they have fights signed, and if it's a ranked fight, they're saying, yeah, this is a ranked fight. They're just not giving the names of the opponents yet. This guy, Chris Duncan, will fight anyone. He ran through Oki whenever that still was like a pretty big accomplishment because Balaji Oki looked really scary and he hadn't lost in the UFC, I don't think, up until this point. He dealt with Rubeski with minimal effort, and then he also called for Alexander Hernandez, or the winner of the fight between Alexander Hernandez and Diego Ferreira. I think I like his shots against a fighter like Renato Moicano or like Beneil Dariush. This would be his way to enter the rankings. I think there are plenty of fun matchups that do exist for him in the rankings as well because he's super down to brawl it and he's a good grappler as well. So, I mean, if he isn't getting anywhere on the feet, he can wrestle and find finishes on the ground. I think that he could be a new top 15 gatekeeper if getting into the top 10 or beyond doesn't work out for him, but I wouldn't discredit his ability to win a fight against like a Michael Chandler. And there's a good chance that if Michael Chandler would have kept fighting and losing fights other than just waiting for Conor McGregor, this could have been a matchup that we'd already have seen. And I think that Chris Duncan wins these types of fights. I think he does good against Gamrot, dude. I think this guy is for real. Next we have Volkan Oezdemir. This is a household name in the light heavyweight division. He's 35, but it doesn't really matter if you're a light heavyweight or heavyweight. This is like your prime years in those weight classes. He always has super violent fights, so that's the reason why I probably thought he was older than 35, is because he's been around since like Cormier era. This guy is basically like what Charles Johnson is in the flyweight division. If like you're an up-and-coming prospect, especially like in 2025 and a couple of years before that as well, Rakic, Guskov, Walker, they had to reinvent themselves before they could be taken seriously post-fighting Volkan, because Volkan did really bad things to those guys and he beat them up. I don't really have any type of biography on this dude. He doesn't speak English, I don't think. I'm not sure if I've ever heard him speak English. He has a cool emote, and all I really know is that he sleeps people brutally, and this is kind of like a sometimes type of thing. In his fight against Carlos Solberg, I mean, it was a violent fight, but it was like a spar. Sometimes he does lose sparring matches. Sometimes he gets chinned, like against Prochazka. It feels like he's just kind of been there, like as a staple of this division for 8 years, and nobody's really given him his stripes. Next, we have the bantamweight Bekzat Almakhan, who kind of clings to the single career achievement in the UFC of dropping Umar Nurmagomedov at a point where Umar had never been made to look vulnerable at any point in his UFC career, his MMA career, before he broke his hand in the Merab fight. I actually predicted his next fight in Qatar. I said that what you should do is make Malcolm Wallmaker versus Payne Talbot, and you should give Bekzat Almakhan a fight with Alexander Topuria. I think he actually does have a shot to beat Alexander Topuria. It's not like a sure thing, but I think that it's a lot more competitive than people want to make it out to be. Kazakh dudes absolutely rock. Who doesn't love a Kazakh fighter, dude? We have Bekzat Almakhan, Azat Maxim, Shavkat Rakhmonov. I guess Varetnikov isn't really that good, but I mean, dude, Kazakh dudes rock, man. They have cool walkouts. They have really nice skills, good wrestling, good kickboxing most of the time. They believed in Bekzat Almakhan enough to have him debut against the current number 2 ranked contender of bantamweight. He kind of got sunned for the rest of the fight after he dropped Umar, and Umar recovered, but I mean, dude, he had his moment, and that's more than Corey Sandhagen did, and he's the one who's getting the next title shot. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is kind of like Alexander Topuria getting a fight with a ranked contender. And they're treating Bekzat Almakhan as if he is a ranked contender to validate guys who they want to build up as prospects, like Umar and like Alexander. They were building up Umar off of Bekzat Almakhan by having him fight with that guy whenever Bekzat Almakhan had no accomplishments in the UFC. But now that he beat up Brad Katona the way that he did and actually has something to hang his hat on here, they're trying to give Alexander Topuria a name off of having him fight this guy and maybe win or lose, because you don't really lose if you're the organization no matter who wins this fight. You get a marketable Kazakh fighter out of Bekzat Almakhan winning against Alexander Topuria. That's if he wins. And you get to build up another Topuria brother if Alexander ends up getting the W against Bekzat Almakhan. So you don't really lose. Next, we're going to talk about the real Gian Silva, Jose Miguel Delgado. This is the actual dark horse of the featherweight division. He low-diffed Haider Emil, who I swore was going to be next up at one point. He smashed Connor Matthews, but who hasn't? So that's the reason why, like, Haider Emil had the achievement of beating William Gomez in France. And I was like, okay, William Gomez is a solid fighter. Haider Emil beat him. Whenever Jose Miguel Delgado fought Haider Emil, I was like, Haider Emil is probably going to knock out Jose Miguel Delgado, even though Delgado has shown some really good skills leading up to this fight. I was wrong. Miguel Delgado ended up knocking out Haider Emil, and he like speed ran him. It was less than 30 seconds, I believe. He's super likable, and he's down to earth as well. I've seen interviews of this guy talking. I like Jose Miguel Delgado. I think he's a cool guy. All of my ball knowers who are really tapped in with this space know that this is a guy to watch because he's really good at fighting. But as far as featherweight prospects go, Melquizael Costa is up there as like one of my favorites. People would consider him a gatekeeper in some events, but I don't think so. I think that he's still developing his game, and he's been on a tear lately. He's an absolute Chad. He has this vitiligo skin condition, and he calls out fighters in English even though he only speaks Portuguese. So this guy is like the Google Translate master. I've actually had interactions with him before where he's like spoken to me in English, but he only speaks Portuguese in the videos where he's actually talking. So this dude is literally putting my messages through the translator and sending his own messages through the translator. This guy's for the people, man. I really do rock with Melquizael Costa. Cool Michael Jackson edits. He begs to stay active. Nobody will fight this guy. His fights are always super violent. He usually finishes opponents, or he himself is getting finished, and that's what I like. If you're a prospect, that's what I like, man. It's not always just about winning, dude. It's like, do I like watching you fight? And with Melquizael Costa, the answer is always an emphatic yes. His body is like a tie-dye of brown spots, white spots, and red spots whenever he fights, dude. It's like he or his opponent, or both of them, are always bleeding a ton. It's always a good time whenever Melquizael Costa fights. The next fighter that we're going to talk about is Neil Magny. This is the king of the Apex. He gatekeeps the top 15. That's kind of his MO. Guys who beat him easily are usually destined for the rankings. He executes every other veteran. He gets like this elemental buff whenever he fights in the Apex. Guys like Alessio Zaleski dos Santos were his last opponent. Even if things look bad for him in the early going, he always ends up pulling a W out of just a random place or position in the octagon and ends up finishing the fight from wherever he finds himself. And it always is super unexpected. I always feel comforted in like predicting that Neil Magny will win certain fights, like the ones that he has in the Apex, just because like he owns that place, man. This is the king of the Apex. But if you are an upcoming contender like Prates, like Morales, Ian Gary won by decision, but KOing Neil Magny is kind of like a rite of passage for future contenders. But aside from that, if you're not proving to be one of these guys who's destined for the top 10 or beyond in the welterweight division, this guy will take you to a war, and he will win if you're not ready for one. He's 38 years old, and he seems to have infinite wars left in him. No types of durability issues on this guy, and an insane amount of heart. Neil Magny the GOAT. Neil Swagny. Bruno Ferreira is an unsung hero of the 185 division, I find. He's super powerful and he has great technique. If you go back and you watch the RoboCop KO, he feinted a rear uppercut, feinted a lead hook, and then threw his cross. The way that he layers feints as well is just, it's super masterful. He's a very good striker in my opinion. His only issue is his cardio, because aside from his striking, he has really good jiu-jitsu. He's a wizard in the grappling. If I'm not mistaken, there was an armbar that he landed on Jackson McVeigh where he had McVeigh's back. I think that was the position that he found himself in. He was on McVeigh's back and he back flattened him, and then he snatched an arm from that position and he finished it, which I'd never seen anything like this before. His next fight is against Marvin Vettori at UFC 323. He dookies on Marvin Vettori, and it's easy. I think he probably finishes the fight, even though Vettori has a really good chin. If Bruno Ferreira doesn't punch himself out trying to finish the fight, I think he can get the fight to the ground, and he can submit Marvin Vettori. There's so many different ways he can finish fights, especially if you're less skilled than he is, which is a lot of different people. He's a real threat to the rankings at 185 pounds. He's just kind of unassuming, and not a lot of people talk about him, so it often goes unnoticed. But I do like Bruno Ferreira a lot. Kyle Daukaus is a fighter who newly rejoined the middleweight division in the UFC after he had been cut following a string of losses that he took some years ago. He lost to Kevin Holland. He lost to Roman Dolidze. I think he lost to Britton Allen, lost to Phil Hawes, lost to Eric Anders. Striking was always the weakest link of his game. He's been called the Darce Knight ever since he came up onto the scene. His grappling is really wicked. But it seems like he's figured that out. He took some time away from the UFC. He won the belt at Cage Fury Fight Championship. That's the promotion that Eric Nolan came off of. So I think that's a legit promotion, since, I mean, his fight with Beisinger was really good. Whenever we're dealing with a guy making their UFC debut and I see CFFC, I kind of see it as the same way as like Cage Warriors or Aries FC. Like, this guy's probably going to be pretty good. Kyle Daukaus is a testament to that. I think that he wins a lot of the fights that he lost, especially against like Anders, right? Like Dolidze, probably. Hawes, for sure. Hawes isn't even in the UFC. I just watched him fight in dirty boxing and that guy got beat up. I think he probably wins those fights. I know for a fact that he wins at least 2 of them. Allen and Dolidze are the only people that might give him some problems still. But, I mean, with this dude striking, there's a good chance that he just knocks him out. I think what they're going to use him for now, since he didn't just sign a 1-fight contract, it was like a proper multi-fight extension. They're going to use him to remove the squatters from the middleweight roster. The guys who are just chilling on the roster at 185. As he's moving up the rankings, I mean, Michel Pereira is going to do a lot for him. But they're probably going to have him backtrack and just get a couple of wins throughout the division against guys who just, the Jose Medinas and the Dusko Todoroviches of that division, mate, just to see what happens if they can beat Kyle Daukaus. And I don't think that they can in 2025. Kyle Daukaus is a marauder. It may be weird that I'm putting a champion here on underrated fighters. I mean, I talked about Pantoja at the beginning, but at least in my brain, I underrated Alexander Volkanovski a lot. Especially going into like the UFC Noche weekend, where I was talking about Gian Silva was going to beat the heck out of Diego Lopez because Diego Lopez went life and death with a washed Volk. And he couldn't finish the Volk who had a deteriorated and diminished chin. It's not even like that, dude. Alexander Volkanovski took 2 KO losses from 2 of the most prolific fighters in the sports history of modern years. And he didn't lose an ounce of his durability. It didn't seem like, because he was taking really solid connections off of Diego Lopez, and it's not like that guy isn't hitting hard. Even whenever it's not spinning elbows and stuff, I mean, he was cracking Gian Silva. This guy holds the 145-pound belt at 36, which is like, it's never been done before. This guy's win over Diego Lopez as well, that I just mentioned before, is aging beautifully, and all of his wins are, really. All of them except for like Brian Ortega, maybe. This guy beat Max Holloway 3 times. Look at what Max Holloway has accomplished since then, dude. This is potentially the most skilled featherweight ever. I mean, he's not the most capable whenever we're talking about him and guys like Ilia Topuria, since Ilia Topuria is the can man and he can do whatever. But if we're like discussing who has the deepest bag at featherweight, it's Volk. It's always been Volk. Volk has such a crazy skill set. And not only is he the most skilled fighter at featherweight, he's the most accomplished fighter at featherweight as well. He's gotten the belt back on 2 different occasions. Yeah, it was a vacant title that he won the second time, but I mean, that's a big accomplishment in itself. Because of who he won it off of and what he had to come back from. Like, look at his face. Look at his face, man. Like, look at the expression that he made as he was falling after he got hit with that lead hook by Ilia Topuria, man. Like, that expression haunts me. I'm not even, like, particularly the largest Volkanovski fan either. And I knew that Ilia Topuria would probably knock him out because he said he was going to, but I didn't know how that was going to affect me, and it did. I didn't feel good watching that. Alexander Volkanovski is him, and he's been him. And if you do underrate him like I did before, it's time to stop sleeping. Because Volk is definitely the featherweight GOAT, man. Johnny Walker is going to be the last underrated fighter that I'm going to discuss here on this list today. This guy bought a new chin from Home Depot. I don't even know what I can say about this one. Johnny Walker comes off of back-to-back KO losses in fights where he got clobbered. Magomed Ankalaev, Volkan Oezdemir knock him out bad. He gets a fight with a guy, Mingyang Zhang, in his home country. Mingyang Zhang has demonstrated some really prolific knockout power against guys who, like Anthony Smith, seem to be on a downturn of their career. This guy hits a walk down on Zhang in China and becomes the mayor of Shanghai. In the past, this guy has 2 good wins over fighters who are still relevant. Iwan Kudalaba and also Khalil Roundtree Jr. Khalil Roundtree, that win is aging super well. But this whole time, his only problem has just been durability. Because, I mean, he's more proven than any other fighter behind him in the rankings, at 205 at least. Anyone who you could argue deserves to be placed higher than him in the rankings in that division is already. And he could come for a higher ranking, no problem, now that it seems like he's got some durability back from his layoff. Because it had been like 2 years since he last fought before the China card. It was to the point where he was getting outshined by Walter Walker momentarily. But he slid for himself in his last performance for sure, so I mean, Johnny Walker, he got it too, man. Super underrated fighter at 205. Y'all just wait and see how my girl Shi Ming finna come back too. Her return is loading. She's just in the lab, literally. Alright, fellas, thank you guys for checking out the list. Let me know what you guys think about my picks of the most underrated fighters in the UFC. I didn't have them in any type of particular order. Please do like, comment, and subscribe as well if you made it to this point in the video. I will catch you fellas in the next upload. Peace out.